Good morning, everyone. We are up to Perek Yud, Mishna Yud Aleph, chapter 10, Mishnah 11. Rabbi Yosi says, Kol nishlokim imat teradim asurim. Anything that is, the word nishlokim means overcooked. What exactly the amount of overcooked, what's cooked, what's overcooked, that's not very clear. But kol nishlokim, whatever is overcooked, imat teradim, together with beets, asurim is forbidden, because they give out tam, they give out taste. Now, we previously learned that if you have vegetables, and the vegetables are pickled together, they're going to be permissible unless we're talking about chassis, we're talking about the pungent bulbs, the kind of bulb plants that have a very sharp taste, like the garlic. And but other than that, two vegetables that are going to be pickled with each other, they're not, according to the Tanakam, according to the first opinion, they're not going to exchange taste with each other. And therefore, if one is truma, one is not truma, it's not going to affect it. But according to that opinion, let's say you cook them together. Let's say you cook the vegetables together. So according to the Tanakam, if you cook the vegetables together, there's going to be an exchange. There's going to be a exchange of taste. Not exchange. There's going to be taste going from the truma to the chulin. Cooking is different. That's been the whole discussion that we're talking about. Even though pickling is supposed to be like cooking, when it comes to truma, we see it's not necessarily that way. So therefore, if you pickle the vegetables together, one is chulin, one is truma, the chulin's not affected. If you cook them together, according to that opinion, it definitely would be affected. Comes Rabbi Yosi to say that kol nishlokim atradim asurim. If you overcook a vegetable together with beets, then it's going to become forbidden because the beets give taste. If we're cooking any other vegetable, no issue. They're not going to exchange. It's not going to give out taste. It's not going to absorb taste. Nothing's going to happen. Now, again, this is only talking about vegetables. We're talking about other foods, that's a different ballgame. Cooking will definitely bring about a transfer of taste from one and be absorbed into the other. But we're talking about vegetables here. This seems to be the nature according to the opinion of vegetables. So vegetables, according to Rabbi Yosi, if you cook them together, nothing will happen. If you overcook them together, nothing will happen. Unless you're overcooking them with beets. If the beets would be truma, the other vegetable would be chulin, then the other vegetable will become forbidden because it's meduma. It has truma taste in it. That is the nature of beets. Beets is going to give out its taste and it's going to get absorbed by the other vegetable. As it says, because they impart the flavor. So that's Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi says, right, you agree. If you pick all the two vegetables together, unless talking about a chassis, like talking about the pungent bulbs, nothing's going to happen. If you cook them together, nothing's going to happen according to Rabbi Yosi. If we're talking about cooking, though, beets together with the other vegetable, and the beets truma, and the vegetable is chulin, then already we say that the beets do impart the flavor into the other vegetable, and the vegetable become forbidden because it's a mixture of chulin and truma. Okay. Good. Now, next opinion. Reb Shimon Omer. Reb Shimon says, Karub shel shikya im karub shel baal aser v'veishu b'leya. Karub is cabbage. Cabbage of a shikya. Shikya means an irrigated field. Means the things can't grow just on the rain. Im karub shel baal, with cabbage that grows from a field that is rainwatered. If those are the two things that you cook together, so the karub shel baal, the one that grows from the rainwater field, that's the truma. The kruv of the cabbage of the irrigated field is the chulin. And you cook them together, it does become forbidden. Mipnei shubayleya, because the cabbage of the irrigated field will absorb from the cabbage of the rainwatered field. So Reb Shimon is saying like this. Reb Shimon is saying that Rabbi Yosi said that the only time that this overcooking is going to have a transfer of flavor from the truma to the chulin if we're talking about beets. Says Reb Shimon, I have another exception to the rule. I agree with you what you say, that the vegetables that are cooked together, regular vegetables cooked together, are going to transfer. I would agree that beets will cause a transfer, but I have another case. If, let's say, you have cabbage of an irrigated field with cabbage of a rainwatered field, there will be a transfer from the rainwatered cabbage to the irrigated field cabbage. Why is that? Because the cabbage from the irrigated field is assumed to be drier, since it doesn't have as much water that makes it grow. Therefore, it is not, let me get you it's lacking. This is the word. The assumption is that cabbage produced by an irrigated field will be relatively lacking in internal moisture, and consequently more prone to absorb flavor from the moister cabbage produced by the rainwatered field, since cabbage stalks are porous. So therefore, you have, Reb Shimon is telling us now another exception, right? Vegetables cooked together, nothing happens. But if you're talking about, even though we're talking about the same kind of thing, they're both cabbage, but one is basically a moister cabbage than the other. The moister cabbage is truma. The less moist cabbage is the chulin. The drier, or the less moist cabbage that's drier is going to absorb the flavor from the moister cabbage. The fact that Reb Shimon said both of them were cabbage, I was wondering, clearly the point, one of the main points here is the fact that the drier cabbage, because it's drier, it's going to absorb. Does the other food have to be cabbage? That's the case. It said cabbage. So it would sound like this is only from cabbage to cabbage. That's what it sounded like. Unless Reb Shimon wanted to tell us something more, even though it has that even though they're both cabbage, they both have basically the same flavor, one still affects the other. And I'm not clear about that. There's one thing, one of the main parts of Reb Shimon's point is that the drier cabbage is, because it's dry, it's going to absorb from the more moist cabbage. Would this apply to other vegetables? I would assume not, because Reb Shimon just said the cases was cabbage and cabbage. Okay, so now both Rabbi Yosi and Reb Shimon say that if you cook vegetables together, even overcook them together, nothing's going to happen. Rabbi Yosi says you overcook the beets with other vegetables, the beets will impart flavor to the other vegetables. Rabbi Shimon says if you have a case of moisture leek and dry leek, the moisture leek is going to impart flavor into the dry leek. And therefore, the truma will be imparted into the chulin, become meduma. It's going to be forbidden unless to anyone other than a kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says, whatever gets cooked one with the other is permissible, except if it is meat. Now, Bartanura learns that this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, there's a question of whether it's Rabbi Yehuda or that this statement is attributed to the sage Rabbi Yehuda or to Rabbi Akiva. But we'll just go with the way we have the wording here. Rabbi Yehuda says whatever is cooked one to the other is permissible, except if it's meat. Okay. Now, what Rabbi Akiva is saying, Rabbi Yehuda is saying like this, and as the Bartanura explains. Any case where you have something permissible, something and forbidden that are cooked together with each other, and they're of the same species, they will be permissible because they do not give flavor one into the other, except if we're talking about meat. That meat will. So basically, according to the way the Bartanura learns, Rabbi Yehuda is going back on what Rabbi Shimon just said before. They're two of the same species. They're both cabbage, just that one is moister, one's drier. They have the same taste. Rabbi Yehuda says two things of the same taste will not affect each other. I'm just going to read to you how the Yad Avram says it. This is so because we do not consider the discharged flavor of one piece to have any significant impact upon a second piece of the same type, since its very essence possesses the same flavor. Not sure exactly what that means. Because it's the same flavor, it won't make a difference. It won't make a difference because it's absorbed. It won't make a difference because it's the same flavor. Maybe it won't be absorbed because it's the same flavor. Not clear exactly what the exact mechanics is. But the opinion of this opinion says that if they're of the same flavor, the same taste, because they're the same species, then if they get cooked with each other, it makes no difference. Unless we're talking about meat. If we're talking about a piece of meat that is permissible and the same kind of piece of meat that is forbidden, although they are the same species, then one will affect the other. Meat's different. It does affect. Apparently, it makes some kind of a difference, even in the taste. Maybe it intensifies it. I'm not sure. But it makes a difference there. And therefore, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So Rabbi Yehuda, according to the Baratanu, Rabbi Yehuda is going back on Rabbi Shimon, who said, two of the same species, one could forbid, make the other one forbidden, because one's truma, one's not truma. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no. If they're the same species, they are not going to make them each other forbidden unless they are meat, unless it's meat. So according to that, Rabbi Yehuda is kind of still going with, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, that perhaps the vegetables that the vegetables cooked together won't impart flavor one with the other. But once it started getting into the question of two of the same type, that Rabbi Shimon said two of the same type could affect each other, says Rabbi Yehuda, two of the same type will not affect each other. Even in your case with the cabbage. And the truth is, whether it's cabbage, whether it's other things of the same type, they're not going to affect each other unless it's meat. That's the Baratanu opinion, which would imply that if we're talking about things that have different tastes, it wouldn't be that way. Then even regular cooking could perhaps, then cooking could impart a flavor. Just also want to point out that Rabbi Yehuda talks about the meat. The wording of Rabbi Yehuda is kol ha-misbashlim, which means whatever is cooked. Before, Rabbi Yossi used the word nishlakim, which means overcooked. So, in Rabbi Yossi, when we're talking about the beets that are that are imparting flavor to the other food, to the other vegetable, it would seem that only happens by overcooking, whatever that means exactly, not by regular cooking. Rabbi Shimon doesn't say in the case of the kruv. Are we talking about overcooking or not? But if Rabbi Shimon is essentially going back on Rabbi Yossi and just making one more exception, basic exception about was the beets. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, they have another exception. The exception is cabbage from the irrigated field and cabbage from the rainwatered field. Okay? It would seem that Rabbi Shimon should be talking about the same case as Rabbi Yossi, which is what the Tosfos Yontiv does explain the Mishna. That they're both talking about that it's overcooking. Here, the word is misbashlim, cooked, which means Rabbi Yehuda is saying that anything that's cooked together, other than meat, and it could very well include overcooking also, won't affect. But if it's meat and meat, meaning vegetable and vegetable, is not going to affect. Right? Same species not going to affect the vegetables. In meat, it will affect. When will it affect by meat? Possibly even just by regular cooking, because that's the word we call misbashlim. So that's how the Baratanu learns. But if it would be things of different flavor, then could be cooking would impart taste, would impart flavor, even according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's interesting that the Rambam brings down that the Rambam learns that Rabbi Yehuda was talking about even different types of food, even different species. So I'll just read it here. Whereas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon stated only that vegetables do not generally absorb flavor through cooking, Rabbi Yehuda adds that no foods absorb flavor through cooking except for meat. Therefore, when most types of chulin food is cooked with truma, the chulin remains permitted. However, if meat is cooked with truma produce, the meat absorbs the truma flavor and is forbidden to a non-kohen. So, according to the way the Rambam's learning, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Shimon that in general, again, whereas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon stated only that vegetables do not generally absorb flavor through cooking, Rabbi Yehuda adds that no foods will absorb flavor through cooking except for meat. And therefore, most types of chulin food cooked with truma won't be affected. Meat will be. That's how the Rambam learns. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, "Hakaved iseres ve'enin aseres." Liver will forbid but not become forbidden, because it discharges, but it doesn't absorb. So, according to what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is saying like this, Rabbi Yehuda said, if you cook meat together, same species, different species, whatever way you learn. But once we're talking about meat that's cooked together, let's just use the Baratanu approach. Meat cooked together with meat will absorb. that it will do. From meat and meat will absorb. Vegetables and vegetables will never absorb of the same species. Meat and meat will absorb the same species. Same type rather. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, there is a meat that's different. And that meat is kaved, is liver. Liver is different. Liver is meat, but it will not be the same thing. Liver cooked with forbidden meat will not be affected. Not be affected. Why? Because since liver is so full of blood, it is constantly discharging blood while it's cooking. And therefore, since it's always discharging blood, it never basically has the chance to absorb anything else. So if you cook something else with the liver, that other thing will absorb from the liver, possibly, and become forbidden. Right. Something else, according to the Baratanura, something else that's going that some other food together with the liver, different type of food, a vegetable, some kind of vegetable, will become forbidden. But if we're talking about, will become forbidden. But if we're talking about something forbidden with the liver, even if it's going to be meat, something else with the liver, even meat and liver, according to Yochanan ben Nuri, it's not going to affect it because the nature of liver is to discharge the flavor. It'll discharge its flavor, discharge the blood, probably discharge its flavor also. But since it's so busy discharging blood, it doesn't absorb anything. And therefore, it doesn't absorb anything, it's not going to become forbidden. So again, Rabbi Yehuda said that the same types of things that are cooked together don't affect each other unless it's meat and meat. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, when it comes to liver, it's not going to be that way. Liver would discharge flavor and possibly make something else forbidden, but it would never absorb. So meat and liver, if the meat is forbidden, the liver will not absorb from the meat. The meat may absorb from the liver, but it's already forbidden anyway. But if the case was you had forbidden meat and you had liver, so the liver, because it's so busy discharging blood, it doesn't absorb from the forbidden meat. So these are the different opinions that we have in the Mishnah. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri again wasn't arguing completely with Rabbi Yehuda. He agreed with Rabbi Yehuda that meat and meat typically would absorb from each other. There will be a transfer in meat and meat. There won't be a transfer of vegetable to vegetable, no matter what, even in the cases of cabbage. There will be a transfer by meat, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says if we're talking about liver, then the liver will not absorb from the forbidden meat. Now, the Baratanura points out that the Mishnah, that the halacha does not follow any opinions of this Mishnah. Rather, we follow the opinion of the Tana Kama that we had in yesterday's Mishnah, who spoke only about pickling. So let me read to you how it's summed up. The law is not in accordance with any of the Tanoim in this Mishnah. Rather, the law is in accordance with the Tana of the previous Mishnah. Any foods that are cooked or overcooked together transfer their flavor from one to the other. Cooking will make a transfer. Cooking transfers. If truma vegetables other than pungent bulbs are merely pickled together, however, we need not be concerned about transfer of flavor. So pickling is not going to transfer unless we're talking about, like the Tana Kama said, chassis, those pungent bulbs. But otherwise, pickling will not transfer a flavor, but cooking will. That's the halacha. Now, another important thing that Baratanura points out here is that the whole discussion about this liver in Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was about, will the liver become forbidden from something else? If you have something else forbidden, a forbidden piece of meat cooking with the liver, would the liver become forbidden because of the forbidden piece of meat? The answer is no, because of the fact that it doesn't absorb. But the thing is that the liver itself, right? Let's say, so the question was, right? The question was, would the liver absorb? We say it doesn't. What if you cook the liver by itself? So the liver cooked by itself, it's going to be expelling blood. Okay. Will it reabsorb the blood? The Mishnah sounds like it's not a problem. The Mishnah's whole discussion was only, could another piece of meat forbid the liver? The answer is no, because it doesn't get forbidden because it expels, but it doesn't absorb. Well, the same idea would apply to the blood that it's cooking by itself. It's cooking by itself and expels its blood. Does it reabsorb the blood? The Mishnah would sound like it doesn't. Based on the reason the Mishnah gives, it would sound like it doesn't. However, that's not the halacha. And however, Rav, I'll read it to you again. Rav and Rambam write that the law is not in accordance with this Mishnah. This is so because the liver is filled with blood, which is prohibited to eat once it is released. Therefore, since as the liver is cooking, it releases blood that it later reabsorbs, the liver itself becomes forbidden through the cooking. The liver must first be broiled over a fire before it can be cooked, as is customary. And basically, this whole idea that the liver, because it's so busy expelling blood, won't absorb anything, we don't pascha like that. And therefore, forget about another piece of forbidden meat being with the liver. If you cook the liver, the problem is like this. Once the blood in the liver gets drawn out of the liver, it becomes forbidden. The blood that's inside the liver is not forbidden. But it's once the blood comes out of the liver, it's forbidden. Therefore, if you cook it, the blood comes out, becomes forbidden, and then because we're in the cooking process, it's going to reabsorb, and therefore becomes forbidden because of itself. And therefore, you can't cook liver. And this is a halacha. You have to broil liver. Broil liver pulls out the blood, and the blood drips out. And then after that, you put the liver what you want. But the way that you kasher liver, which is the way you remove the blood from the liver, has to be through broiling. Because if you cook it, it's just going to reabsorb the blood that became forbidden. It's going to become forbidden. So as we mentioned yesterday, the mitzvahs we're about to do now are the mitzvahs that are called mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz, mitzvahs that are only obligatory in Eretz Yisrael. And so the first set of mitzvahs that is brought down here is 4 of them. And that is mitzvahs aseh l'haniach peah me'atfuah v'yilonis, a positive commandment to leave a corner or an unreaped part from one's grain or trees. So to leave what we call leket, which is gleanings, single ears or fruits that fall aside during the harvest. You have to leave eilulos and peret of the kerem. Okay, so what does this mean, eilulos and peret of the kerem? So peret is like what we said, leket by grain or by fruit, which is as you're picking it, something falls off and, or it falls away from you, that you'll leave for the poor. Leave that for the poor. When we talk about grapes, it's called peret. Eilulos means like this. I'm just going to read you how they translate it. Small bunches of scattered grains, which do not overhang one another from the trunk and have no arm connecting the stalks to the trunk. So basically, when you have a cluster of grapes, the grapes kind of lean on each other. That's number one. Number two, you also have like a middle stem, and out of the middle stem comes a smaller stem, and out of that stem comes smaller stems where the grapes grow from. So I believe that eilulos means you've got the middle stem. Yeah, they call it no arm connecting the stalk to the trunk, right? That's my understanding is what's missing here is you've got the it's calling it the trunk. I think that means the middle, the thicker stalk in the middle. And then instead of having like an arm, which is another stem, and then smaller stems coming out, the smaller stems that the grapes grow from are coming directly out of the stalk. That's called eilulos. If that's the kind of things that you find, so again, it's missing. They're not leaning on each other, and also it's missing the arms that connect the grapes to the stalk. It's missing the arm connecting the stalk to the trunk. That would now be eilulos. That's left for the poor. Shenema, as the pasuk states, "La'ani v'lager tazav oisam." You should leave these things to the poor and to the stranger. Hainu amatana shishku lefnei. What are you leaving over? All the gifts, all the things that were mentioned before, they have to be left for the poor. You have to leave them for the poor. The owner has no discretion where it goes. The owner can't say, okay, this ani, he can get it, but that ani can't. Got to leave it for any ani. Now let's say a situation, there are no poor coming around looking for it. They're not obligated to leave it for the birds and for the animals. And so too, if let's say something or another happens to these fruits or that these things are supposed to be taken by the poor, and it doesn't happen, he's not obligated to give the value of what was there to them. According to Torah law, this applies in Eretz Yisrael. Now, the midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, it would apply even outside of Eretz Yisrael. There are those who say the there are certain areas close to Eretz Yisrael that midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, become obligated to separate Shum and Meiser from in those areas. Bavel was one, Egypt was one, and according to some opinions, only those areas close to Eretz Yisrael that, according to rabbinic law, would have had Shumas and Meisers, they also have these gifts to the poor. But places that don't have an obligation of Shum and Meiser midrabanan wouldn't have this rabbinic obligation of leaving things for the poor. Okay. Have a wonderful day.